it is COMP228 Java programming, and it is week 12, lesson 12, part 1 in our broadcasts. Hopefully the broadcast will work today. So let's get back to what we were doing last time. We left off with our, we're going to go back to lesson 11's module, the one we were working with last day, which is, we had a couple of things here. Remember that we clicked it off. So the one I'm looking at online is COMP228 lesson 11. So if I was going to go back up here to see where that is, that would be on GitHub. And one day when GitHub responds to, that would be on Centennial. And it would be COMP228 lesson 11. This is the one you know, right? Okay. So I'm going with this one because I want to continue down the path we're going, and we need to fix some stuff. So remember last day what we had going on. If I was to look at the two files, we have a package called com.companyname.jdbc. That's our package. And remember we talked about packages being almost like a folder structure or a namespace. By the way, packages and namespaces, whether you're using them in C# and other languages, they allow us to compartmentalize our code into different sections, different containers, so that way we can organize ourselves a little better. Right? That's what they do. So we have a couple of those. We have a couple of files in our JDBC package here. One of them is a file that we made called dbconfig, which is our configuration for our database, our username and password, where I've kind of put it in there. And we call this for the connection. So we kind of go, dbconfig.connection, and then we connect to our database. And the other thing that we also kind of put together is some custom error messaging. So I can say error message, error code, and so on. That was one piece. The other piece was our program.java, but it's getting kind of full. Like there's a lot of stuff that's going on in this little code here. And I want to abstract from this thing, our little program here, by creating another set of things. We want to do full CRUD today if we can, right? So we're going to do the rest of our create, update, and delete. We've done our reading, no problem. And we're going to keep some of this stuff that we have, like some things that work over here, but we're going to make some new things, some new structures for ourselves. So let's start off by talking about our model, all right? Because one of the things we want to talk about when we make, updates, create, update, and delete the whole CRUD with any kind of database in a modern environment these days is something called a model. We talked about this whole idea of model view controller, right? Where we have our model, which takes care of how our database is structured, our schema for our database. We have our controller, which accesses the model. And then we have our view, which actually what it does is it formats how the user sees our the data that comes from our model through the controller, right? That's how it does, right? So model view controller, that whole, a three-tier kind of application architecture. It's almost like a design pattern that's been around for a while. We talked about MVC, model view controller, right? All right, so we want to kind of separate our little program here in that way. And what I want to do is, to favor that, I'm going to create a new file here, but I'm going to make it under a different package, right? Because we've only done one package so far. So I'm going to go right-click onto my COMP228 project, and I'm going to say new. And instead of new project, I'm going to hit click down here where it says package, new package. Do that with me, right? Remember that the package is a new namespace. Now it's really important how we name this one because we're going to create something called a Java bean, right? And we're going to use a Java bean in order for us to almost like hold the model information for our database. That's what it does. So the model for our database, the schema for our database is going to be held in something called a Java bean. We're going to talk about this over the next little while in a little more detail. So we need to kind of name it appropriately. And we already have com.companyname.jdbc, but I want to go one further than this. I want to create another namespace that's com.companyname.jdbc.beans. Okay, so let's do that. So we'll put that in. So com, again, we're using reverse domain namespacing for our package name. Okay, com.companyname.jdbc. That's kind of what our code is all about. .beans. It's important that we name it beans so Java knows whenever you have a namespace that has beans, then it's a Java bean. Right? It's kind of a special way to do that. So again, for people who don't understand the reverse domain namespacing, right? Normally, we have a domain, we go to whatever the domain you are.com, right? Or mydomain.com, whatever it is. Apple.com, Microsoft.com, Oracle.com, Java.com, right? But when we create our namespacing, the best practices, if you will, the convention that we all use when we make things like Java packages, things for Android devices, when we create Android applications, as well as iOS applications, we use reverse domain namespacing for this, okay? So this is what the thing. So we have to add the beans on the end. We're going to click finish. Now this, if you notice, creates an empty domain, empty package. There's nothing inside of it. But we want to create our new model inside of there, right? And this is where our models are going to be in this beans package. So I'm going to right click here on the beans package. I'm going to go new, and this is when I'm going to create a new class. Right? So I'm going to click new class. Still, our superclass is java.lang.object, right? And that's pretty cool. But we're going to name this thing the class that we're going to, typically, if we were going to call our list, if you notice in our, let's go back to it before I complete this. If I go back to my database, and I'm just using, by the way, pull up your MAMP, WAMP, LAMP, whatever stack you're going to use to get your MySQL database going. Remember, we're using MySQL database to access the database, and I'm using PHPMyAdmin to access my database. You could also do it through another service like DigitalOcean or whatever you're doing to do it. Also, Oracle database is very similar. Well, let me take a look at this. So I'm clicking on my movie list, and my movie list, I could have called this thing movies, or, but this is a list of movies. That's what it is, right? Movie list. If I browse, I can see that my data shows that there's a bunch of movies. I've got so far 11 movies in my list, right? Kind of more modern movies we've looked at, lately. Okay, so this is where we got all our movies. And so each row represents a movie. So when we create our model, the model that that we're going to use, the Java bean, so to speak, right? Which is the old way we used to call what we call now a model, right? The model or the schema for our database is going to be outlined in our Java bean, right? Okay, and we're not going to call it movies because each of our the model will describe one row. Each row is a movie, right? In this particular context. Now, if you were going to make it so that you're going to create an admin user base or some kind of a username and password database of users, right? You might call a database or a table users or user list, whatever, right? When you make your Java bean for user list, your model, it would be called user, single, right? Not users. Because each row in the users table, if you had a kind of log in, log out kind of procedure, would be a user, username, password, email, their profile, right? So in the same vein, we're going to create our new Java bean here by making it call, we're going to call it movie with a capital M, because that's what we're doing right now in this context, movie. We're going to click finish. Okay, so we have our movie. We also have this auto-generated constructor, which we're not going to need right now. All right, so we're going to just erase this one because we're going to use the empty constructor when we create our when we use our model anyway. Okay. So let's, like we normally do, let's talk about our private instance variables. That's I kind of like to comment a little bit with like this, create a little bit of a header. Some professors may not agree, but it's okay. I'm doing it for us. And I want to use private instance variables here. So it's going to be, we're going to follow the convention, okay, like we normally do. Now, we want to try and match our database as closely as possible with the names of our properties, okay? But you don't have to, right? Sometimes database names are really long. You want to make them so that they kind of relate, they're contextual. For us, we're only going to do, the only thing different we're going to do is going to use an underscore for our database, for our private names, like we always do. So when we say private int, remember that our first, going back to the database for a second, notice that it's broken up like this: ID, name, description, release date, rating, and genre, right? So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have an ID, a name, a description, a release date, rating, and genre properties in our model, right? In our bean, Java bean, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to say, so ID, right? And we're also going to have a private string, which is, of course, name. And we're going to have a private string, which is, of course, description, right? And a private date. And be careful what date it's going to be. We'll talk about which date it is. 2 dates, due date types, which we're going to call release date. And we're going to kind of do underscore release date like this, release date. And we're going to do the next one, private, typing right, private double, because we made our rating a double, which is just going to be called rating with an underscore, if I can get this right. And then private string for the genre of the movie, right? So if it's an action movie, is it a sci-fi movie, what kind of movie is it? Now let's fix this problem with date. And notice if I hover over it, it gives me a couple of options. Import date, java.sql, or import date, java.util. Which one should I do? No, it's Java SQL, right? And the reason why is if we do util and SQL are two totally different data types, right? And because our data in our database is a SQL database, that's the data type we want to use, right, for this one. So let's use that one. So make sure it's not data java.util. It's not that one. Okay, so we've got a list of our properties, our instance variables. We want to create getters and setters now, right? So let's say we'll put this here. Let's say this is where we're going to put getters and setters. And how do we do that? Well, it's easy to do. We're going to right-click here, and we're going to go to refactor, and we're going to do is it refactor? Sorry, source, and we're going to generate our getters and setters. There we are, right? And it's going to ask me which ones I want. I want them all, but we're going to have to do a little bit of modification here because we want our getters and setters to make sense. Okay. We also want them to be public. Okay? We want them to be public here. I'm getting all these things. Are you with me? I'm going to click OK here. When I auto-generate my getters and setters, I got to go back in here and fix them up a little bit, right? Because I want them to be named correctly. Let's put a little space in here, and we're going to go and kind of put them in like this. We're going to say these are our public properties. Remember, private instance variables, public properties. That is a typical way we structure an application, whether it's in Java, whether it's in C#, whatever. It's always the same, right? It's, what we want to do is we want to use data hiding here, or information hiding, which is one of the concepts that we use when we do, proper classical inheritance. The whole model of classical inheritance basically suggests that we should do this. So we're going to kind of go through here and modify some of these names so that they're good. For example, set ID with an underscore. We want to kind of make this a capital, so set ID. And also over here, if you notice this ID, which is something that's incoming, we want to kind of do one of these, and we want to kind of fix that up. Right? So we want to fix the usernames and all that stuff. And the reason why it's doing this is because, of course, I am, I'm a real stickler for how I name stuff, right? So I'm going to go through here and just update, so that the getters and setters that are auto-generated are just the way I want them. Right? Now, you may not decide to do that. You might say, oh, I'm good with it, Tom, who cares, right? That's fine. You can do it your way, but this is the way I do it. Right? So I got to go through here and modify everything one step at a time. And I mean, I could have been smarter about this. I could have changed things afterwards, but you may run into this if I'm showing you what I recommend you do, right? So we're going to use these getters and setters for our beam, our model, if you will, as we progress through the this lesson today, right? So I'm just going through them. So all I'm doing is changing the names, here to kind of use. I'm using the this keyword as much as possible as well, so we indicate where it's coming from. And then I'll update GitHub so you guys have all my changes. You can always check against my changes to see that I have what you have. And vice versa. The rating. Well, this is important. This is kind of an important step. Once we create our model, then we can use our model. We can fill up our model and use it to do interactions, transactions, if you will, with our database, right? We could certainly not we don't have to use Java Beans for our model, or a model, if you will. but it's kind of more of an accepted way of doing things these days. So might as well stick with what what works. Okay, so I've kind of gone through and changed all mine, and this is definitely our. I'm going to put in there. I'm going to call it. This is our movie model. So I'm going to kind of make a note here. Movie model, right? Java Bean. That's what it is. Here, Java Beans. This is it. Right? One of them is a Java Bean. This is our movie model, right? And all it is the properties or the instance variables followed by the properties, the getters and setters for each of our instance variables. Okay, that's all I've done. Nothing fancy here. I noticed that I'm not really creating a custom constructor. I'm going to use the default empty constructor when I use the new Java Bean class, okay, which I really don't need. All it's going to do, whenever you use the default constructor to create your objects, right, all that happens is that the properties, all these properties, as well as all the getter and setter methods, right, the public properties and instance variables, they get instantiated along with your object, right? That's what's happening. Even if you use the default constructor, the empty constructor. Okay, so I'm going to update the file here. So I'm going to go to team, and I'm going to go to commit. And it says, hey, it hasn't been saved. You want to save the changes? I say, absolutely. And I want to add in this new namespace, this new package, which is source com, company name, JDBC beans, this movie.java model. Right? So I'm going to say added movie model. And I'll also say it's a Java Bean. Right? So everyone knows what it is. We're actually going to call it the Java Bean, right? We're going to use, right? So commit and push. And that'll push everything up to the up there. So if you want to take a look at movie.java, it should be now, you can see it under com.companyname.jdbc.beans, which is our new namespace. Questions so far? What the model is, if you're doing more modern web design these days, right? And if you're going to do stuff with the mean stack, right? So Mongo, Express, Angular, Node, right? Whenever you use some way of accessing a NoSQL database, like, for example, Mongo, you need to create a Mongo schema, right? And this is what we've done here with our movie. We've actually created a schema for our database. And this is something else. I'll put in that. That's another thing. We can also call this, our database schema. Because that's what it is, right? It's almost like an understanding of what our for this particular table. We only have one table on our database, our movie list, right? So for our movie list table, this is the database schema. So this follows that if I had multiple tables, I would have multiple Java beans. Each one that would be associated with the table, right? So that way it would be associated with the schema that we're using for that table, all right? So that we understand how to, and again, we're going to use this as a container, if you will, right? A container to contain our changes, and we're going to push an object into the database, a whole row, as opposed to one thing at a time, which is more challenging, right? Okay, so this is the first piece. So we can close this off now. We don't need this anymore. Our Java Bean is complete. Your failure is complete, Luke Skywalker. All right. Java Bean is complete. Let's go back to reality. And what we want to do now is, I also need some other stuff. If you notice here what we did in our program class a bunch of times, I'm just going to make this a little larger for this so you can see back in what we did. And if I was to run this thing just the way it is, so I'm going to run it, it's going to list off all of our movies. And if you notice, it's going to list movies that are that I've kind of filtered so that it's 2, 4, 8, 10, and so on, right? This is neat now, right? But it really doesn't do much for us. And also, if you notice, I'm doing stuff like this. I'm doing things like system.out.print. And if I was going to make a lot of examples here today, which we would, like set double, all this kind of stuff, I want to be able to do some of this, this stuff with a little helper class we're going to make. So I want to create an input helper to allow us to get input from the user and help us manage proper input from the user. Okay, so let's create a new class that we're going to call input helper. It's going to be a utility class. All right, now again, if I was going to do things the right way, take a look at what we got here. We've got com.companyname.jdbc, com.company.jdbc.beans, right? And I could split off my dbconfig.java. I can move that into its own namespace, because these are just folders, right? Called config. So I could say something like com.companyname.jdbc.config, and I'll call this dbconfig. I could do that, right? And then I could access the dbconfig class by importing the new package, right? I could do that. And that's kind of it's a best practice for us to try and do to understand how we separate, folders work. But for now, we're going to put everything other than our Java bean, we're going to put inside the same package just to keep it simple, right? But you could create new packages, and I would recommend it for each of our classes that relate to a particular section. For example, I could create one called controllers, right? And in our controllers package, we could have a bunch of controllers, right? Which I recommend, right? But for now, we're going to keep it simple, put it all in the same thing, except for our Java bean, which is, again, we need to use the beans, package in order for us to understand it's a bean. So I'm going to right-click here. I'm going to go to New Class, and we're going to create a little helper class that we're going to call Input Helper. Okay, it's going to help us get input from the keyboard or for ourselves. Now, because you guys have this assignment 5, and you're going to be using Java effects for your assignment, this input helper, again, would be very similar to what you need, somehow getting information for the user, right? So you could use another form of the input helper class that we're going to create today in order for you to do that. All right, now we're going to use the input helper utility class as a static, where you're going to use static methods from the class. We're never going to instantiate the class, just like we did last time, right? We're just going to use the static methods of the class itself to do certain things for us, right? So we don't have to call them within our program, all right? So again, here's our input helper. We're going to click create. We don't need, obviously, since we're never going to instantiate this class, we don't need our input helper constructors. We're going to get rid of that. And now we're going to talk about some stuff we need. We need definitely some kind of string, a way of getting string information into our stuff. Because we have a lot of strings. We have our movie name, we have our movie description, we have all those kind of things. We're going to ask the user to enter this information over and over again. And I want to refer to this. We're going to say public static then. And we're going to call this, we're going to return a string from this method. And we're going to call this method just our get input. But instead of get input, we're going to say get string input. So when we call a get string input class, right, we're going to ask for a prompt. Right? We're going to prompt the user for a string of information. Okay? Follow me here. Right? Inside there, we're going to use something called, and you may have not seen this before, a buffered reader. All right, so we're going to say buffered reader, new class we've never seen before, with some kind of standard input. As it's a standard input variable that we're going to use, standard input. We could call this, as an example, input. Right? We could call this input as well, right? Which is totally fine, and which is equal to a new little object called buffered reader. And why would I use a buffered kind of class to get input, input from our console? By the way, when you're using your Java effects class, you don't need to do this because you're going to have a form, right? You're going to have a string, you're going to have a text box that allows you to enter information, right? So, but for now, we need this. So I'm going to say input. So it's going to be of type input stream reader. I'm going to read from our, make this a little larger so you can see, and we'll fix all the errors. Input stream reader, and we're going to say system.in. That's what's going to come into our stream. Okay? This is a way of us getting information from the console. Right? Notice how it says, if I hover over, it says import buffered reader, which is the java.io class. We're going to do that. And we're also going to import our input stream reader, which is also part of our java.io. Okay, so those are the two imports I'm making there. Make sure that I close off that little parentheses there, and my parens are all closed. Okay. Notice how I'm getting a bit of an error because I need to return something from this string. I need a return statement, right? Because I'm waiting for the string to be returned. I haven't returned a string yet. Let's do the next piece. So I'm going to say, so we're going to do a sysout, right? Here's our sysout statement. And our sysout is going to say prompt. It's going to listen for whatever the prompt is. That's what we're going to show. Whatever the user enters for a prompt, like enter a name, it's going to go into our print line. It's going to say enter a name, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to say very simply system.out.flush. We're going to flush the stream, the buffer. That's what we're going to do. You may have seen this structure in other programs as well. Buffer reading. All we're doing is we're creating a buffer, almost like a container for our stream, our input stream. All right? We're getting input from the console. We don't have to do it this way, but it's nice in terms of the way it reads from the console. Now, in order for us to get stuff out, we're going to do a standard input read line. We have to create it in a try-catch block. Now, we can not do that. We can do something like this. Return, watch. Return stdin, or our input dot read line, right? Because our input is of type, is now of type buffered reader, right? That's what we're returning, and it's actually going to return a string, okay? But there's a problem with this, and if you notice, it gives us a little underline, and it says, hey, this might be, you know, we might be throwing a problem here, an error. So let us surround it with try-catch as a solution to this error. So we've surrounded it with a try-catch. Notice you get an I/O exception, right? If there's some kind of input-output exception, it's going to kind of burden us with that. Now we know instead of using our simple our print stack trace, instead of doing that, let's use our syserror. Okay? We're going to print out in red the exception. And again, we could make it so that it says, as an example, what the exception is. Right? So there's our message. We could do that. Or we could just return this exception back to the console where it's got the user that's calling it. So we're going to say something like this: return error, whatever the error is, plus e.getMessage. Remember, the getMessage method is part of every exception handling, the generic exception handling option. I/O exception is the type of exception we're getting. We could also make this a generic exception like this, which would also work fine. It's an exception, right? For specific, it'll only catch I/O exceptions. We don't need to do that. We can make it generic. And I don't like the whole idea of E. I hate that. I'm going to just call it lowercase exception, right? Because it makes more sense to me. There's our get string input. That's what this thing does, right? And this is our when we want to get string from the console. That's what we're going to do. Now this would be replaced in your input helper if you needed one to get a string that you're going to do some validation for from your text box, from your Java effects. Okay. Let's do some more because we need a string. We definitely need a double. We need an int, and we need a date, right? Those are the four we need, all right? So we can't do any kind of input. So we need some prep work before we do actually get into it, right? All right, so that's our get string. We also need to get a double. We need to get a double, which is our rating. And let me just write them all down, what all the stuff we need. We need to get a double. We need to get an int, right, integer, right? We need to get an integer, get a double. We also need to get a date. So what's the order we need it? We need a string, integer, double, and maybe a date will be last. Okay. Get date, right? From the console. Right? From the console. So every time we ask for the user for input for one of these things, we're going to use our input helper class to get it. Okay? Let's get rid of this extra exception. We don't need this. We can remove this unused import because I changed it from an I/O exception to just a regular exception, right? And let's start typing the integer one, all right? So it'll look very similar to the other one. Let's say public static. Again, when we use public static, it means we don't have to instantiate our class to use this method. We can use this method without, we just have to call the class name, input helper dot get string input, or input helper dot get integer input. I think we're going to write that right now. Get integer input, right? So here's our get integer input. And we're going to, again, we're going to do the same thing when it asks for a string prompt, right? So from the user, That's what's going to happen, right? And we're going to return, what are we going to return? An integer, right? I return an integer. That's the one thing that's going to be different, our integer. But it's not, it can't be integer, it's going to be int, right? Okay, let's do the next one. So we're going to say string input, we're going to say the same, we're going to use the same variable name, input, right, is equal to, we're going to do this, we're going to say get, notice how I can use the same, now that I've made an input class, like get string input, I can use the get string input class here, right? So I say get string input, right, which is going to be a type prompt, right? We're just using this. We're using this method right here, this static method in here, in our mother method, right? Once we've declared it, we can use it, get string input. And all we're doing is saying, whatever the user asks us for, we're going to get a string input to say, hey, give us a string, right? Now, what we're going to do, we're going to convert it, right? We're going to say return, and this is where we might have an issue, integer dot parse int, whatever the input's going to be, right? That's our method for integer. So we're going to do all that here instead of doing it over there, right? So we only have to name these things one time, and then they're good to go. Otherwise, we'd have to parse int every single time, which is a royal pain in the ass. Okay, let's do the same thing. Notice how if I was going to make our get double input, it would be almost identical. Let's just copy and paste. We're going to grab this class, this method here, and paste it in there. And instead of returning an integer, we're going to return a double. We're going to call this thing get double input, right? And we're going to still do the whole string thing. And instead of returning integer.parseInt, that won't do. This is where it changes. We're going to do a double.parseDouble with our string input. Right? That's what we're going to return from that one. So that's pretty simple. Here's the more complicated one. This date is the pain in the ass, right? And I gave you date so that way you can do dates. And I want you to think about how to do this a little bit more carefully. This one takes a little bit more work to do. All right, so we're going to start off with this. We're going to say public static, and let's just add some extra spaces in here so in our file so you can see what it is. When we work on this one, public static. Now this is where we need a date. We need a date, but it can't be a date as in the one we're returning is going to be the Java SQL date type, right? But we need to manipulate the string with a regular date type, the date util type, right? There's two types. There's a SQL date and there's the java.util.date, right? So we're going to actually return it kind of weird. We're going to say java.sql.date. That's what we're going to return. That's the type we're going to return. And we're going to say the same thing, get date input, right? We're also going to pull for a string, right? String prompt. And so that's kind of some of the stuff we're doing here, right? As normal. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, string input, as you normally do, is equal to our get string input of a prompt. That's normal, right? Everything the same so far. Now here's where we get crazy. We're going to do date, new date, and it can be for any kind of date we're getting in, is equal to a new simple date format, right? But we're going to ask for YYY dash month dash day, right? And we're going to parse the input that we're going to get to convert it. All right, wow, there's a lot of stuff here. First of all, what kind of date is this one? This one, folks, is a java.util date, this one. We're going to import this one, not a java.sql date. Okay? That's why it gets crazy. And our simple date format will be the same thing, import simple date format from java.text. We do that one to fix that problem. Okay, now we still have a bit of an issue. In a second, we're going to get there. Let's keep typing. Now, we're going to say this. Java, we have to return something, right? Java.sql.date. right? We're going to make a new variable, temporary variable called SQL date. And let's make it like the way it should be, SQL date, like this, is equal to java.sql.date, and then in open brackets, our new date, right, dot get time. Don't ask me why it's like this. This is the way we convert it from one to the other, right? Java to SQL.date. And we have to make a new statement. How about, we can't say equals to, we have to say equals to a new anonymous object, which is of type java.sql.date. Okay? And now we still need to return. So we're going to say, what are we going to return? We're going to return, of course, the java.sql.date object, which is SQL date. So far, so good, but we still got this error. And the error tells us a couple things. It says either surround with a try-catch, which we could do, or add a throws declaration. So it throws an error. Let's, for the simple sake of this, add a throws declaration to our method. Okay? So it's going to throw a parse exception, potentially. If it doesn't parse the date properly, we're going to have a problem. In fact, if we think about it, we should be throwing exceptions for all this stuff. Like, for example, some of these ones that get integer input when we parse int, right? That potentially could throw a number format exception. So let's do that. So we'll say throws, number, when I press control space, number format exception, right? That's potentially what it throws. So I'll put that in there as well, just to be preemptive, okay? As well as this double, right, also throws a number format exception, right? Because it could throw a number format exception if I format it incorrectly, as an example. There's no validation of it, guys, right? So, there's all the validation you have to do. You can do it with a try catch as well. If it's not proper, you can ask them for proper input. All that stuff is not here, right? I'm not doing that right now for the sake of time. Even this is a lot for our input. All right, so we've got our input manager class, a utility class that we have 4 methods, right? This is the main one, our public get string input method. We have our public get integer input method, our public get double input method, as well as our public get date input method, which is the tricky one, right? Which is using this Java SQL date. And what I'm doing here is, if you notice, I'm using the package name, right, to the exact package name to associate with the return type, because we need both. We need the Java SQL date, and we also need a new date type object. Now I could have done, instead of doing this here and this here, but that's what it really returns, this date type. I could have made it so that I imported, instead of importing a regular date, like Java util date, I could have imported this Java SQL date type, right, or both. The only challenge is you'd have to really, how do you separate them? They both have date as their class name. So you have to kind of say it somewhere, and this is the way you differentiate. All right, so we have our input helper class. That's cool. Let me update GitHub, because we just added a new, whole new class. So we're going to do a commit, and we're going to click on this one here, input helper. So we're going to say added input helper utility class. The utility classes in my book are classes that really don't instantiate. You don't kind of use an object from that class in any way, right? That's up on GitHub now. So if you missed something, or if you didn't type it right, it's there for you. So I was just prepping right there. We're going to still prep. There's still some more prep we need to do for this stuff. If you don't do all this prep, it's going to cost us in the long run, right? Because we have lots of stuff of things to do things. When we want to do things properly, we have to create our helper classes and our models and everything else. Okay. Now, this is where we get a little bit, we diverge from what it says sometimes in the book, right? So, because this is the way I see it. When I do my programming, I do it like this. Okay, so try and follow me here and be patient with me. You'll see what I'm doing. So I don't need this anymore. I don't need my input helper Java. I'm going to kind of close this off. My DB config is kind of good the way it is, so I don't need that anymore. Just close that off so I don't have to see that here. My program.java class, that's a problem. I'm going to get rid of all this stuff in a second. But we need to copy and paste some of it, right? Because there's no point rewriting everything. I need another class. I want a class that's going to be our controller. and I'm going to use the controller name inside of our class. Some people also call it manager. Like, for example, some kind of input manager, whatever. I could have also called my input manager my input controller, well, whatever you want to call it. But the one I want to use here is I want to use the name, I'm using the name controller in here because I want to set you guys up. So if you ever do model view controller in another language, you've seen a controller, because this is what we're really doing here. Okay. So let's make a new. I'm gonna just for now. I'm gonna close this one up so we don't have to see it, and I'm gonna open up a new class. Now again, just to mention again, so you guys hear me, right? You could make another package here, which is of type com company name.jdbc.controllers. That's not going to be wrong, all right? It's a good practice. I'm not going to do that here to keep it simple, right? We have enough with one different package. You'll see in a bit. So I'm going to make new class off of the main package, com.companyname.jdbc, right? By the way, I called it JDBC. You could have called it whatever your application is going to be called. But for example, for assignment 5, maybe you want to call it com.whatever your name is, assignment 5, right? So com.aaron.com, right? Com.aaron.assignment 5, right? As an example. Com.selena.assignment 5. Okay, so now here I need a name for the class. So I need to make it so that it's the movie controller class, right? Now I could make it movie list controller because our table is called a movie list, right? Which makes more sense. So movie list controller, right? Our movie list controller class is going to have, again, I'm just going to say this to you so you guys see it. It's not going to need a custom constructor, because when we create the object, our movie list controller object, all we're going to use is our methods from this object to manipulate our movie list database. Okay, that's all we're using it for. So I'm using the name controller to just so that you remember that we're going to manipulate the model with our controller. The model is our Java bean, this schema that we're using, right? The controller is going to manage or manipulate the model in order for us to do, our CRUD operations, our create, read, update, and delete operations for our database. Okay. Let's click finish. When I do that, it creates my movie list controller, and I'm just going to say again, this is controller class for our movie model, which is a Java bean. That's what we're going to be using, right? And we don't need a constructor. We can get rid of our default constructor in there, right? Now, I know that if we're not going to kind of do all this from scratch, right? But every time we create a method, right? For example, when we want to read all data from our database, right? Almost like we want to do the same thing that we did before. I guess I'm boring. So if you look at this, let's bring up our program.java for a second. Program.java did that, right? Where we have in our main method, our main static method here in our program, we kind of pulled up all the data that we could filter, right? We filtered all the data here by getting the name. Now this is where, see where it says result. We kind of did our, enter our stuff, and we actually had a minimum rating. I just set the minimum rating, and we actually didn't do any input, right? The minimum rating of 4. Well, this same structure here is what we're going to do in our new class, right? So let's get rid of all this. We don't need it in our program class today. So I'm going to use my program class. I'm going to wipe it out. Okay? And I'm doing this because as we go through, right, and I'm going to start displaying stuff, right, in our program. The first thing I'm going to need to do is display all rows. That's the one thing I want to try and do. So I want to write that one in. I also notice our public main object throws a SQL exception. I'm not going to get rid of that. We're going to probably still throw a SQL exception. We don't need a SQL statement here in our private method because we're going to use that inside of our custom movie controller class. That's where all of our SQL statements are going to be written, not here. Right here, we're going to consume the movie controller class, right? So the other last time we got together, I showed you the way of doing it with one class, but we want to compartmentalize this with a controller, right? All right, so then in our movie list controller, we need something to read all data. So read all data, we need that, right? Kind of show the whole table, if you will, right? We're going to need also something, another method that kind of, read from one row. Read, from one row. We need that one. We also need to do stuff like, we're going to insert one row, right? That's our creation. So insert one row of data, right? And we're also going to delete one row, right? This is our CRUD, if you think about it, right? Delete one row. And we're also going to update, right? But insert is actually really creation, right? We need an update as well. So we're going to say updates one row, right? Those are all the, I'm just putting this as almost like a little bit of a reminder of all the things we need to do. These are all the methods we're going to write today, right? We're going to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more methods, right? Each method is going to do slightly different things, right? Are you with me on this one, right? So this is how I would break it down in my controller class. And you'll see the same structure in C# and in other languages. Same idea, right? So let's do this. So in our read, right, remember this is, we're never going to instantiate our movie list controller class, right? We're just going to use the methods here, just like we did before, almost like we did before with our utility class, right? So we say public static void, and we're going to say display, we're going to call this display all rows, for this method, display all rows. And we know it's probably going to throw a SQL exception. We're going to say throws, because we did that before, SQL exception, right? That's what it's going to do. And inside this public static void method of display all rows, right? We're going to declare a couple things. One is our new string object. That's going to be local to the method, right? We're going to call it as a SQL query, right? That's what it is, a SQL query. And in our SQL query, just like we did last time, we're going to make a select statement. So we're going to say select star, that means all, from what? Movie underscore list, right? That's going to be our query statement. So just to remind you guys what we did last time, when we did our loaded try catch, if you will, it's actually what it is it's a closable, all the closables, all objects with a closable, that implement a closable interface can go in this special loaded try catch, if you will, right? It's called different names, we'll talk about it later. So it's in our loaded try catch, let's make the structure for it, right? We need to make a try, and we're going to have a catch associated with our try, right? Which is going to catch what kind of errors? Probably SQL exception errors. So we're going to say SQL exception, and we're going to call this exception, right? And it's going to be able to catch that. So we're going to create a structure for ourselves right here in order for us to receive, and manage our closures, right? Remember that instead of me doing an open and closing all the time, I can put the objects, the streams that I'm opening and closing inside this try catch block, inside the loaded try, the one with the parentheses here. Enhanced try, whatever you want to call it. There's all kinds of other names too. Okay, so inside of here, I'm just going to do one of these. I'm going to go into my block, my parentheses, and just space it down. And what I want to do is, from a structure perspective, I want to kind of make those two things line up, right? So that way, when we do things properly, they have their own little structure. In the next line, I want to put in the connection string we're going to make. So we're going to say connection, lowercase connection, is equal to what? Right? We use a db config, right? So I'm going to say db config dot, and then of course the get connection string, right? We're going to get a connection. That's the first thing. Our connection has to be able to connect. Notice as we go along, we're going to take care of our input things like we did before. So we're going to say our MySQL JDBC connections that's what we're putting together, right? Now, is that the way, right? Or is it a SQL connection? Which one is the one we're going to use, right? Because I want to make sure It's the second one, SQL connection. All right. Because you might get confused, you might put the wrong one, and won't work correctly. Okay, now we're going to do, again, if we're gonna do this properly, right? We can use a statement or a prepared statement. When will we use a prepared statement? Statement, there's two types of statements, statement and prepared statement. We covered last day, right? The statement allows us to execute a query, right? The prepared statement, what it allows us to do is a little bit different. It allows us not only to, to create a query, but also interpolate different, stuff in here. So for example, in our select statement, our query string, we could put in a question mark as almost like a placeholder. We can listen for data, right? We don't need to do that here because we're getting everything from the list. So I don't need to use a prepared statement here. I'm going to use just a regular statement, right? So it's a statement, which we're going to call statement, is equal to connection. I'll fix that in a second. Connection dot create statement. Okay, that's what it's going to do. Notice that we have a statement. I'm going to hover over it, and I'm going to go to import the statement from java.sql. Java.sql. That's the statement that I want, right? I don't want the other types. Okay, cool. So I've got my statement, right? And now I need a result set. So I'm going to say result set. I'm going to call it result set. That's the object. It's equal to statement dot execute query. We're going to pass in there the SQL query string that we got. Notice how we have to go over result sets, and we have to import the java.sql result set again. These are the ways we do things. First, we have a connection. Then we create a statement, right? The statement object, what we do is create a statement container for the object, right? Once we have our statement container, we do our statement execute query by passing in the string into the container, and then using that as an input for our result set. Okay? It's almost like, hey, execute this statement right here, which is our SQL query. Right? Okay, so now that we've done that, and we've done it properly in our try catch block, notice that the errors went away. Our try catch block has errors if we don't put anything inside of there, right? Now, inside of our try catch, inside here, we're going to do that while loop again. So we're going to say while our result set, while there's a next for our result set, our next position or next row when our cursor go to the next row if it's possible, right? Keep going until there's no more rows to go. That's what it's going to do. So really what this is doing is keep on looping until we're going to go through every row until there's no more rows in the result set. Okay. Okay, now some other weird things. Remember, we're going to try and use buffering as much as possible, right? So here's something new that you haven't seen before. We're going to say string buffer, right? I'm going to call this buffer is equal to a new string buffer object that's going to hold our result set. That's where it's going to come from. And we're going to append to the buffer our string values. We're going to print them. We're going to kind of spit them all out, right, all at once. We're going to say buffer. This is kind of neat. Looks like a big string. Buffer.append, right? And we're going to append in there the first piece of the string. So let's say movie, right? Plus the result set dot get int, not get string, get int, right? And we're looking for the column index, which we simply call ID, right? Because that's our column index. If I go back to here, right, our ID is the number of the movie. Movie 1, as an example, right? This is our index right here. Plus, we're going to add in there, right? Plus, we're going to add in there some kind of colon, right? So movie 1 and a space. Right? This is just our way of formatting everything, right? It's almost like doing in advance. Did I add an extra thing in there? I probably did. this is the way of kind of the same thing of us creating a string. Instead of concatenating a string, we can use a string buffer to do the same thing. That keeps kind of hold of our string. And then we can spit the buffer out with a system.out.println. Okay? Again, more of a formatting thing and more of an advanced way of doing things as opposed to just concatenating. So I want you to see this thing at least one time. Next, we're going to also buffer.append. Right? We're going to append the next one to the buffer, right? Which is result set dot get string. And now we're going to use a string from a column with the string type, which we're going to call name. Right? That's the string, the column that's a name, which we're also going to use just a little bit of formatting to add a little bit of a dash there. You can do whatever you want there to make it look nice. Right? So string name followed by a dash. This is all in one line, by the way. Right? This will appear all in one line, one row. I'm not going to put in the description because it's too darn long. Right? Description can be like 1,000 characters, so we're not going to put that in. We're not going to read that part, right? But you could, and if you were going to do that, you'd just add a result set dot get string, and then you put in a description there instead of a name, right? Remember, the names, these names, the string that's going in here has to match the row name. So the name of the row in the table, ID, name, description, release date, and so on, has to match exactly that. Unless you want to use a number. You could also use a number. But that's not as accurate because what if you change your row around? What if you change your structure for your database? You're messed, right? So you don't want to do that. You want to kind of target that. All right, so that's two things, and then we want to kind of say we want to kind of create a temporary date variable to spit out because a date variable requires a little bit more work, like we said before. So I'm going to say date, and again, this date is going to be a type of what type of date is it going to be? Equals. I'm reading from the database. What type of date should it be? SQL date, right? So I'm going to do date. We're going to call this release date. This is a temporary variable we're going to use here, which is equal to result sets dot get date, and then the column index, which is going to be called release date, underscore date. That's what I called it. I'm not wrong. If you're not sure what you called it in the database, or if I've called something different, go to the database and take a look. It's called release underscore date. That's what I call the column name. Okay? Going back. Let's go in here and change this date type from java.util to java.sql, so it doesn't give us an error. And again, it adds up the imports up here, right? So it puts the imports in the right position here. Okay, so we've got a temporary variable to read the data in. We're going to format the date, so we're going to say date, and we're going to call, date format, and we're going to call this date format. We're going to create a new date format, which is of type, which of course is going to equal to date format dot get date instance. I'm going to say that way. I apologize. I know it's kind of long. But what it's going to do is it's basically going to create a new date format object because we need to format the data as it comes in. If we don't format the date, then we can have really weird results. We won't do this later on, but I want to show it to you now. Buffer.append, then what are we going to append? We're going to append we can't do it yet. No, first we got to do the string. We're going to do this, the date converting to string, right? Otherwise it won't be proper. So we'll say string, there's the formatted date, some temporary variables, formatted date, right, is equal to date format, right? And we're going to put in there release date. It says, just looking at this to make sure it's correct. I'll be okay. Date format, hold on a second, date format that get instance, and then date format that format. That's what we need, not format. I'll be okay. So date format dot format. is the date. But to format the date, so it's part of, it's the proper date that we're going, it's like a SQL date. And then we're going to convert it to string. We're converting it back to string. Now we're going to say buffer, right, dot append, and we're going to say released when it was released. We're going to say released when was it released, plus we're going to add in there the formatted date. That's the formatted date that's released, right? Plus some kind of space. We're going to add in there, right? That's all for dates. Date is a pain in the ass, but I'm showing it to you guys. If you guys search through it, you can find out how to do it, right? If you're asked for a date, okay? There it is. All right, next, buffer dot append. What are we going to add next? It's going to be the rating, right? So we're going to say result set dot get double, because our rating is a double. That's the way we've made it. We're just going to call this thing rating. It doesn't have to be double. It could have been a float as well. Cool. And then the next one is maybe we want to add a little bit of space in there as well. So probably do one of these. So plus, and then maybe a dash again. So that way it's a little bit of separation. There's different ways of doing that. Again, you wouldn't have to do this when you use JavaFX. In JavaFX, you just output this stuff to each of the fields, right? Each of the fields, you get the set text value of the property of the field and set text to this information. But you want to, again, you want to convert them to string, especially for date, before you set the text. Unless, of course, the date is a date type. Okay, next, buffer dot append. And we want to do genre then, right? Which is what is it? It's result set get string, and it's going to be just the genre. Okay, so cool. Now we've got our buffer. It's full. We've got our buffer full of stuff, right? It's a string. Now it's simply the matter of just outputting. So it's sys out, and we can say our buffer. Okay? Dot to string. And then what it's going to do is going to take our buffer, convert it to string. So this is going to format everything into a string, and we're going to output it to the console this way. In our catch statement, we need something else, which is I recommend something like we used before, dbconfig dot display exception, right? And we're going to pass in the exception. We already have our dbconfig working for us to do that. Okay, so that's it. This is the end. Let's put a little bit of a remark. So this is end of read. We just did our read all, kind of display all rows. That's what it is. So this is what we're going to put. We're going to call this display all rows. Display all rows. So we know this is the end of our little method. So questions around this stuff. What we're doing here. So first, just to go over it. First, we make the SQL query. I'll go back in a second. So I'll show it to you. So first, we make our SQL query, right? Which basically says select everything from the movie list, right? In our enhanced try block, what we're going to do is we're going to put in a connection string that connects to the database, right? To MySQL. And remember, anything we put inside this enhanced try block has to be implement the closable interface, right? And because it does that, the enhanced try block automatically closes off the connection after it uses it. So it opens the connection, connects to the database, closes the connection automatically, right? After we've done the same thing, and it does it in reverse order. So then we open up a new connection to the database where we create a statement container, right? And the statement container is going to carry forward our SQL query, right? With inside of a result set. We're going to use the statement.execute query with our SQL query string, this one we made, and it's going to return the data into our result set. What we're going to do then is we're going to use our result set by filling this buffer. We use the string buffer object, right, that we're going to fill up with our result set. We're going to format it nicely in one line. This is just I've just broken the line down into different lines here, right? And then we're going to output it to the console. Finally, if we have a problem, somehow we get a SQL exception error, we did something wrong, we're going to use our custom display exception method of our dbconfig utility class to show what the problem is. Okay, let's try it out. So how do we try this out? First, we'll save the class, and then we'll go into our my program, which is empty right now. And what am I going to do? Call it. So I'm going to say, now how do I can call this class, because I don't have a display all rows. I'm going to try this out. So display all rows, right? And if I kind of do that, it's going to say, hey, you can do something, right? It says that you can create method display all rows, but that's not it. How do I call the display all rows method? Well, see, it's movie list controller. That's what we're using. So we can just append movie list controller on the front of that. So movie list controller dot display all rows. And what it's going to do is it's going to use this static utility method inside the movie list controller, and it's going to use this to display all rows in our database if we're successful. Let's try this out. And we'll just do that by, let's clear this output out, and click the kind of the run and see what we get. And I get everything, right? In the exact way that I wanted it, right? So Spectre, when it's released, number of stars, I updated that to 3.5. Our genre, action and adventure, right? So all that stuff is right here, from movie 1 to 11. And we did that through our little method that we wrote here in our movie list controller, which is the display all rows method, we'll call it, right? Very nice and easy. Okay, cool. Let us update GitHub, because that way you have everything. Somehow if you did it wrong, and if it's getting you some weird error, then you can check across mine and see if it's good. So I'm going to go to team. I'm going to go to commit. And I'm going to say added movie movie list controller. Right, that's what it is. Class. Still kind of a utility class the way I'm using it. So might as well make it so it's a utility class. So you can see it. And I also updated my program to kind of try that out. I'm going to commit and push, and you should see the changes up on GitHub. Questions so far? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and when we come back, we'll do the rest of the CRUD operations for our little thing. All right? And of course, I didn't save anything. I just saved myself talking the whole time.